1513. Picture it. A group of indigenous people, we don't know exactly where, exactly who. There were hundreds of these moments, standing on land their grandparents were buried in. Land they have farmed, hunted, named. Land they have never once thought of it to own, because the idea of owning land is not something their culture has a word for. A man steps forward, sometimes a notary, sometimes a friar, sometimes both. He's carrying a document, and he begins to read. He reads in Spanish or in Latin. Nobody in front of him speaks either. He knows that. He reads anyway. The document says, God created the world. God gave authority over the world to St. Peter. St. Peter passed this authority to the popes of Rome. The current pope has now granted these lands, your land, the land your grandparents are buried under, to the King and Queen of Spain. Therefore, says the document, you must accept the church and the crown as your rulers, right now, without delay, without conditions. And if you do not, if you resist or fail to respond, or simply look blankly at this man reading Latin at you in a language you cannot understand, the document itself makes clear that everything which follows is your fault. The war, the slavery, the chains, all of it. You were given your chance. You didn't take it. So the document itself says, what comes next is just. This document has a name. It's called the requerimiento, the requirement. And here's the detail I cannot get out of my head. Conquistadores often didn't even read it to the people it was addressed to. Sometimes they mutter it towards the tree line, toward a village while the cannons were being loaded behind them, toward an empty beach before the boat had even landed. The point was never comprehension. The point was paperwork. A document that made conquest look like a legal Christian act. And because the document invoked the name of God, the name of Jesus Christ, the whole thing got to be called Christian. I want you to sit with that for a moment before I say anything else. This is not ancient history, not something that happened to other people in another time. It's a question that has followed us for 500 years. Because here's the thing about using God's name to justify crime. It doesn't change who God is. It just tells you something about who the person using his name is. And it raises another question. If that God, the one in the document, the one who needed legal paperwork to justify a war on people who couldn't understand it, if that is not the God of the Bible, then where was the real one that morning? Here are the questions this entire episode is built around. Was Jesus even theirs to bring? Or was he already here? The requerimiento was not a mistake. It was not one rogue priest with a bad idea. It was the output of a legal and theological system that had been under construction for decades, built specifically to make conquest Christian. It starts with a series of documents called papal bulls, official decrees from the Pope and the Catholic Church of the 15th century. What the Pope said carried the weight of divine law. In 1452, Dum Diversas, Pope Nicholas V grants Portugal the right to, and I'm reading the language directly, reduce to perpetual slavery the peoples of Africa and any others who were enemies of Christ. Reduce to perpetual slavery. Those are the words, those are the Pope's words with his seal on them. 1455, Romanus Pontifex. The same pope extends and confirms those rights, authorizes Christian monarchs to seize the land, possessions, and persons of non-Christian people. 1493, Inter Caetera. Pope Alexander VI, the man who divided the entire non-European world between Spain and Portugal with a line on a map, formally grants Columbus' discoveries to Spain. The justification? The people already living there are not Christian. That is the argument. That is the whole argument. We claim your land because you don't believe what we believe. And claiming your land is how we plan to make you believe it. These three documents together are known as the Doctrine of Discovery. For 5 centuries, the doctrine functioned as a legal foundation for colonial land seizure in the Americas, in Africa, in Australia, in Canada. Property law in Canada still carries traces of it. Baptism was part of the same machine. If you were baptized, you were legally a Christian. Christians had certain rights, not many, but some. So baptism was offered as a transaction. Convert now, and your situation improves slightly. Convert now, and your labor becomes indentured rather than enslaved. Convert now, and the document your children will be born into looks a little different. That is not an invitation to faith. That is coercion wearing a sacrament. Almost makes me think of how the invitation to convert now sounds from the pulpit some Sundays, when people call out to convert now or go to hell. Convert now or go to hell. That is not an invitation to faith. That is coercion. And then there's the real cedula of 1770. I named this in episode 2. And I'm naming it again because it belongs in the same sentence. The real cedula banned indigenous languages from being spoken anywhere in the empire, in schools, in churches, in public markets, in private homes. Replaced by 4s with Castilian Spanish. Same machine, different tool, different century. First the land, then the tongue, then the religion. All of it wrapped in the name of God. All of it stamped with a cross. They didn't bring us the gospel. They brought us a sword with a cross for a handle, and they called the wound a blessing. Here is the part of this story that doesn't fit the simple version. Almost immediately after the conquest began, there were people inside the Catholic Church who looked at what was happening and said, "This is not Christian. We cannot do this in the name of God." In 1550, in Valladolid, Spain, the Spanish crown actually stops, pauses all new colonization to hold a formal theological debate. The question on the table: can the conquest and enslavement of indigenous peoples be justified as a Christian act? On one side, Juan Gines de Sepúlveda, a respected theologian, his argument, drawn from Aristotle: indigenous peoples are natural slaves, deficient in reason, incapable of genuine self-governance, and therefore better off under Spanish rule. Conquest, he said, was mercy, and an act of Christian charity towards people who couldn't manage without it. On the other side, Bartolomé de las Casas. Las Casas had owned an encomienda. He had participated in the system. He had been part of it. And then he saw what it actually was, from the inside, up close. And he walked away, renounced the encomienda, spent the rest of his life arguing loudly in courts and convents and royal chambers across Spain that indigenous peoples were fully human, fully rational, fully capable of receiving the gospel without a sword pressed against them. He argued that the requerimiento was a legal fiction, a document designed to produce the appearance of consent where none existed. He argued that forced baptism produced no real Christians. Oh, that makes me think of how now accept Christ or go to hell. Accept Christ or go to hell. Pray the prayer. Pray the prayer. Forced baptism produced no real Christians, he argued directly that God was not honored by violence committed in his name. The debate ended without a decisive ruling. Conquest continued. Las Casas did not win. But I want you to notice what that debate tells us. Within 20 years of the requerimiento being written, people inside the same church, people using the same Bible, worshiping the same God, speaking the same theological language, were already saying that what was happening in the Americas was not Christian. The institution was never one thing. It never is. And the presence of Las Casas matters because it shows that the problem was never the gospel. The problem was who was holding it and what they were willing to do with it. July 9, 2015, Bolivia, the Second World Meeting of Popular Movements. Pope Francis stands before a room full of indigenous peoples and grassroots organizers and community leaders, and he says this: I say this to you with regret. Many grave sins were committed against the native peoples of America in the name of God. Pope Francis, Bolivia, 2015. And then, I humbly ask forgiveness, not only for the offenses of the church herself, but also for crimes committed against the native peoples during the so-called conquest of America. July 2022. Pope Francis travels to Canada. He stands on the same soil where indigenous children were taken from their families, placed in residential schools operated by the church, and in many cases did not come home. He apologizes in person on the land. March 2023. The Vatican releases a formal statement. The doctrine of discovery, those 3 papal bulls from the 1400s that authorized the seizure of indigenous land worldwide, the Vatican formally declares the doctrine was, I'm quoting directly, not part of the teaching of the Catholic Church. From 1452 to 2023, that is 571 years. 571 years to officially say this was never the teaching of the church. I'm not telling you this to mock the apology. An apology matters. Accountability matters. The Vatican statement was real, and it had real implications for indigenous land right cases still moving through courts. I'm telling you this because the gap tells you something about how institutions work and how prophets work differently. Oscar Romero, I told his story in episode 4, did not wait for Rome to catch up. He saw what the institution had aligned itself with. The landowners, the military, the government, that was killing his own people. He named it from the pulpit every Sunday on the radio. He was assassinated on the altar in 1980. 38 years later, the church called him a saint. The margins always know before the center admits it. Prophets always get there before institutions do. And the apology leaves a question unanswered. A question this episode is trying to answer directly. If that was done in the name of God, but it was not actually God, then where was God while it was being done? What was God doing while the requerimiento was being read? Where was Jesus while the papal bulls were being written? Because he was somewhere. He's always somewhere. Acts chapter 17. Paul is in Athens. He's surrounded by people who have never heard of God, of the God of Abraham, the God who led Israel out of Egypt, the God who spoke to Moses at the burning bush. These are Greeks. They have their own gods, an entire pantheon of them, temples built for all of them, altars on every corner. And Paul walks through the city and he looks at everything. And then he stands up in Areopagus, their public forum, the place where ideas get tested publicly, and he does not open by saying, "You people know nothing, so let me start from zero." He says, "I can see you are deeply religious in every way. I walked around your city, and I looked at your objects of worship, and I found an altar with this inscription: to an unknown God. That unknown God, the one you have already built an altar for, the one you were already worshiping without knowing his name, that is the one that I'm here to tell you about. He quotes their own poets back to them, not from the Psalms, not from the prophets, from Greek literature, Aratus, Cleanthes, as if to say, the truth was already in your tradition. The reach was already in your hands. I am here to name what you were reaching towards. And then he says this in verse 26. From one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any of us. Acts 17:26-28. I'll read it again. From one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from us, from any of us. He made every nation. He set the boundaries of their dwelling places. He did this specifically so that they would seek him, not so that the missionaries would bring him, not so that the ship would carry him across the ocean to people who had never heard his name, so that every nation on the land God himself placed them on, within the boundaries that God himself determined, would reach toward him and find him, because he is not far from any of us. Paul is not talking about a God who is somewhere else, waiting for people to receive the right message before he shows up. Paul is talking about a God who is already present among every nation, already near, already woven into the fabric of what it means to be human, already reachable by people who have never heard the name Jesus, and who is closer than the missionaries who come carrying that name. Think about that in our present time. He is closer than the missionaries who come carrying that name. He's not far from any of us. He's not far from the people who have already heard the gospel. Any of us. He's not far from any of us. There is a missiologist, someone who studies how the gospel travels across cultures, named Don Richardson. He spent decades doing field work in cultures that had no contact with Christianity, no contact with each other, no reason to have developed similar ideas, and across dozens of unrelated languages and people, and kept finding the same thing: a creator God. Not one of the working gods, not the god of rain or the god of harvest or the god of the river, standing behind the pantheon, more primary than the gods of daily survival, often de-emphasized, sometimes half forgotten, but never entirely lost. Richardson called this the eternal high God pattern, and his argument was this: missionaries don't bring God to people who had none. They reintroduce a creator the culture already knew, partially, incompletely, reaching toward, under a name the culture hadn't yet received. They did not bring the light. The name, the light that was already there. In episode 2, I told you about my father, El Indio, not a nickname everyone said with kindness. 100% indigenous from Cojutepeque, at the foot of the Cerro de las Pavas in El Salvador. In episode 3, I named myself Cuscatleco, no Latino, not Hispanic, Cuscatleco, from Cuscatlán, the Nahuatl name for what the Spanish would call El Salvador. Lugar de collares de piedras preciosas, place of precious stone necklaces, a name my ancestors gave to their land before anyone arrived to rename it. I carry Nahuatl words in my mouth every day without knowing it. Tomate, chocolate, aguacate, coyote, tamal. The food system of the world is built partially on Nahuatl. You do not need to speak the language to be carrying it. It lives inside the words you use without thinking. So when I ask whether God is present among my people before the Spanish arrived, I'm not asking a theological exercise. I'm asking about my father, about the people from El Cerro de las Pavas, about my family's land. Here's what I found. In Pipil cosmology, the spiritual framework of my own people, the Nahuatl-speaking Pipil of what is now El Salvador, there's a figure named Teut. That name comes from the same root as a broader Nahuatl word, Teotl. And the Pipil sources, Teut is named as creator, father of life, something standing apart and above the working gods, Tlaloc, the lord of rain, Quetzalcoatl, the feather serpent. Let me be honest with you here, because this show is not the place for overclaiming. Scholars of Nahuatl religious thought, specifically people who have spent careers studying what Teotl actually means to the people who use the word, have argued that Teotl functioned more as a dynamic, sacred source of energy than as a personal creator in the biblical sense. That is a real important distinction. I'm not going to smooth it over to make it parallel neater than it is. But I will say this. The shape is the same as what Paul described. Something primary, something standing behind the gods of daily survival, something more original than the pantheon, something the people reached toward in moments that ordinary religion couldn't hold. And is the same shape Don Richardson found in culture after culture after culture, including cultures that had no contact with each other, no shared language, and no reason to have arrived at the same form independently. Then there is Viracocha, the Andean peoples. The people of what is now Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador, had a figure that Spanish chroniclers, writing from multiple independent sources, describe remarkably consistent terms. Viracocha, the supreme creator, the one who made the sun, who made the moon, who made Inti, the sun god himself, and set him in the sky. Viracocha stood above the pantheon, not inside it. He was not the god you pray for rain. He was the one the rain god pointed back toward. Chronicles described him wandering the earth, teaching people the arts of civilization, and then walking west across the Pacific, promising to return one day. Multiple chroniclers, multiple traditions, the same figure, a creator standing apart from and above everything else. I'm not claiming Viracocha was Jesus. I'm not claiming Teut was Yahweh. I'm not trying to collapse the difference between this tradition and the God of Scripture as if there's no work left to do. I am saying this. The shape is the same. A creator, present among the nations, placed among them, known by them, partially reaching toward, not quite arrived at, the unknown God with an altar already built, though he is not far from any of us. Any one of us, including the people of Cuscatlan, including the people of the Andes, including the people who were standing on the beach when the boats arrived, though he is not far from any of us. This is not just a historical question. There are peoples alive today doing theological work of putting this back together. Richard Twist was Sikangu Lakota. He became a Christian, and then he spent his life asking questions that a lot of the church was not ready to hear. Why does following Jesus require me to stop being who I am? His book is called Rescuing the Gospel from the Cowboys. The title tells you everything. The gospel arrived in indigenous North America tangled up in a particular cultural package, European, colonial, individualistic, dressed in the aesthetics of the Western frontier. And over time, that package got confused with the gospel itself. Twist spent his life carefully separating the two. His argument, you can follow Jesus as a Lakota person, as a person who dances, who drums, who carries the traditions of your people. Jesus does not require you to become European first. The gospel is not a culture. It is a person. And the person was present among indigenous people before any missionary arrived, in the form of a creator they already knew, partially reaching toward. Randy Woodley is a Kitowa Cherokee, a theologian, a historian, a teacher, a shalom and the community of creation. He builds a case that the biblical concept of shalom, wholeness, right relationship, peace with God and with creation, has a close parallel in what many native peoples call the harmony way. Not because one tradition borrowed from the other, because both are pointing toward the same reality, because the Creator planted a longing for the harmony in every people He made. That is Acts 17. That is the eternal high God. That is the altar already built. Now, hold all that next to episode 4, next to Gutierrez, next to Romero. The preferential option for the poor means God is not neutral. God is not hovering at a safe distance while the powerful do what the powerful do. God takes a side. And the side God takes is always the same. The widow, the orphan, the stranger, the one on the underside of history. If God is not on the side of the conquest, and the gospel of the margins says He's not, then God was not arriving with the conquest. God was already with the people being conquered, already among them, already near. The Jesus of the requerimiento is not the Jesus of the Gospels. The Jesus who authorizes just wars, declaring languages people cannot understand. That Jesus is not the one who was born into military occupation, to a family that fled as refugees, who spent his public life among the sick and the outcast, who was executed by the state while the religious establishment cheered. These are not the same person. The colonizers took the name. They did not take the person. And that means the name can be taken back. Let me answer the question I opened with. Whose Jesus is this? Not the requerimientos. The requerimientos Jesus blessed conquest. He needs a legal document before he'll show up. He's a tool of empire. And we have been on the receiving end of what the tools of empires do for 500 years. That Jesus did not belong to indigenous peoples, because that Jesus was not real. The real one, the one in Acts 17, the one who said He is not far from any one of us, the one who was born outside in a space where the animals slept, to a family under military occupation, the one who died executed by the state at the request of the religious establishment, that one did not arrive by ship. That one does not need a papal bull. That one was already here. My father, El Indio, 100% indigenous, his family from Cojutepeque, from the foot of the Cerro de las Pavas, he carried a faith that arrived through violence, through coercion, through a system built to erase who he was and replaced it with something more manageable. He kept the faith anyway. I have thought about that for a long time. I think about what it means that something real enough to survive the requerimiento, real enough to survive the real cédula, real enough to survive 5 centuries of being used as a weapon against the very people it claimed to love. That something was never just a European import. That something was recognized. Maybe it was already known, in different words, on a different altar before the ships. In episode 2, I traced the Nahuatl words still alive in our mouths: tomate, chocolate, coyote. Words the world uses every day without knowing where they come from. The language was almost destroyed. It never fully disappeared. In episode 3, I named myself Cuscatleco, not Latino, not Hispanic. Cuscatleco, because the land had a name before the Spanish arrived, because my people had a name before someone else gave them a different one, because you can reclaim what was taken. The faith is the same. It was not theirs to give. because he was already there. In the reaching, in the altars half built, in the creator that the Pipil and the Indian peoples and the Lakota and the Cherokee and every people God placed on every piece of land he made were already imperfectly, almost fully, reaching toward. The missionaries named something real. The colonizers corrupted the vehicle. Those are two different things, and I refuse to collapse them into one. The faith my father carried, that my children are growing up inside, is not a faith we receive despite who we are. It is a faith we receive because of who we are, because of what our ancestors were already reaching for, because of an altar that was already half built when the gospel arrived to name what was standing on it. Whose Jesus is this? Mine, yours, ours. He always was. Desde antes de que los barcos cruzaran el océano, Él ya estaba aquí. Él puso los límites de nuestras tierras para que lo buscáramos y lo encontráramos. No como extranjero, no como conquistador, como el creador que ya era nuestro. El nombre fue robado. Ese mismo nombre puede ser recuperado. What does it mean to follow Jesus right now? What does it mean to be Latin American today? It means reclaiming what was taken from us, including the name of the one who was already here. It always will. Hasta la próxima.